Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast and live stream. I'm Jessie Lezak, fractional CMO at BDEX. And today we have BDEX's Enterprise Sales Director, Adam Fitzgerald, with us. Welcome back to the show, Adam.
Hey, Jessie. Good to see you as always.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here because we are bringing on a guest who is coming in from PhoneBurner. And, just being in sales, I know you've made a phone call or two.
Just at least a couple.
Maybe. Yes. So this is going to be a great conversation. Let's just go ahead and bring him in. Welcome to the show. We've got Chris Sorensen. He's the CEO of PhoneBurner.
Chris, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm super excited for this conversation, as Jessie alluded to, being in sales, understanding that phone calls are a critical component to our success. I'm really pumped to hear what you have to share with us today. And so I'm wondering if maybe you could kick us off by just telling us a little bit about your story and what led you to become the CEO of PhoneBurner.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. It's kind of ironic that this week, kind of a slow news week around the world and the country, Deconstructing Data is, the name of the show to be a part of. I feel pretty fortunate to be part of that because I think one thing everybody's doing right now is deconstructing the data that they saw going into the weekend and into the early part of the week and wondering maybe what happened. So very timely to be on a podcast like this and a show. And I'm grateful to be here with both of you. So my name's Chris Sorensen. I'm based out of Seattle. PhoneBurner, I'm the CEO of the company. I've been here at PhoneBurner since Valentine's Day 2020. And prior to that, held a couple of different roles, different parts of organizations, started my career in data, absolutely love data. Then, you might call it going to the dark side, went over and did the sales part of it for a while. And then was able to fortunately find myself in a position to be CEO of a great company with a great group of customers and teammates that we're surrounded by here. And just excited to have a great conversation with you guys today.
That's awesome. Well, let's get right into it. We've got some really great topics. And so our first topic is redefining outbound calling. So some people, you see on LinkedIn, all these sort of things, and we're live on LinkedIn right now. So if anyone's listening and they have opinions on this, just throw it out there, but, that cold calling's dead, but really it's not. You got to get the right data. You got to have the right message. So could you talk to us a little bit about that? Because you know this better than anyone in terms of all of redefining outbound calling and quality over quantity.
Yeah, I think there's actually another word too that would be really good here that starts with an R, and I think it's a renaissance of calling. And what I mean by that is we've got multiple different ways in which we can try to reach out to people to start to build relationships and make connections. You certainly got SMS, you've got email, you've got social, and you got the phone. And I think if we start to look at all the different channels for which you can use to build relationships with people, all of them are under a tremendous amount of pressure, right? You've got email now with so much sophistication. You got people talking about swapping out domains, all these different things to try to land your message into somebody's inbox. And it's just getting harder by the day. And you're competing not only as somebody maybe, authoring these emails, but you're competing against, hundreds, if not thousands of solutions with generative AI that are just contributing more and more email and messaging that's trying to break through. And I think it's getting more difficult. Take a look at another channel like SMS. Ask anybody in the last year, maybe 2 years, how easy it is to actually go out there and run an SMS campaign to try to get in touch with people that you're trying to build a relationship with. And I think the answer will be, how many beers are you going to buy me? Because it's getting more and more difficult to actually get approved, especially here in the US, to send out SMS. Social, we know certainly with, certain privacy acts that are being passed by, different states that are out there, it's getting more and more difficult to do the type of targeting that you'd like to do. Certainly there's a lot of additional expenses coming on. It's not a very efficient channel in some ways from an expense to output standpoint, which leaves us with the phone. And, in our business and for our customers, what we're finding is that there is absolutely an opportunity to redefine how you use the phone, be successful with the phone, and start to make those initial conversations with prospects and people that you think may have a genuine interest in what it is that you're providing, your product or your service. And so I think if you rely on the phone, or your job requires you to try to connect with people, to take them a message, identify if they've got a problem that you might be able to solve, the phone, I believe, over the next couple of years is going to have a tremendous renaissance. And it's going to really be a very valuable tool in everyone's belt. But it all comes down to, how do we best use it? And there's a lot of different parts to that part of the conversation. But I'm really excited. Our customers are experiencing great results. Other people that are using other platforms are telling me that the phone is really, right now at this point in time, the primary tool and channel that they're using to get in touch with people.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, I mean, that really resonates with me. You used the word renaissance a couple times, and I keep going to the word reinvention. I mean, the phone, if you think about it, is aside from direct mail, it's like the oldest form of communication, or it's been around the longest.
That's right.
And so I think the approach and the strategies that people are having to use to be effective and efficient, that's another word that's kind of been jumping out to me here as I've been thinking about our conversation this afternoon. In order to be effective and efficient with your phone outreach, the strategy and the approach just has to change. So I'm curious a little bit about what you're seeing work really well there.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think there's a couple of things on it. One is, just for a moment to kind of go back and talk about some of those other channels, right? SMS, email, social, some of those other things. Anytime you have incoming from one of those, it doesn't take over the device. A phone call is the only thing that takes over this device completely, right? Doesn't matter if you're on Instagram, doesn't matter if you're checking your bank balance, doesn't matter if you're, scrolling through a website. When a phone call comes in, it takes over everything else. And so I think as we consider what we got to do to alter our strategies, is you got to have a really good first impression in order to get a shot at starting to have a conversation. And so as organizations start to look to the phone to be, more prevalent in terms of their outreach efforts, the number one thing you got to do, is you got to make sure that you understand how your phone calls are showing up. If your calls are showing up as spam, if they're showing up as telemarketer, if they're showing up as survey or whatever, or it's an unrecognizable area code and prefix, that is not the best first impression. You've got to make sure that you understand what's being presented on the phone. And I think, there's a lot of people that do that really well, but there's a lot of people that I don't think understand how important that actually is. So we always make sure, as priority number one, understand how you're presented on the device. Number two is, it's important, I think, for anybody that is, a leader or of sales teams, or somebody that, is actually responsible for making those calls, in addition to knowing how you display on the device. The number two thing that you got to do is you got to be ready, absolutely ready, to make sure that as soon as that call is answered, you're available to them. And this is something that we see a lot of people get in trouble with, right? Based on the type of technology that they're using to reach out to people. Most of us, I say that pretty generously, but most people are not okay with, well, I really don't know who that is, I'll answer, and then hanging out for 2 or 3 seconds, waiting to be connected to somebody. It smells like spam, right? When you make that call, you have this delay, and then somebody's like, oh, hey, Bob, or, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it's not, I don't think it's the most respectful thing that you can actually do when you're trying to reach somebody, particularly when you're trying to make a first impression. So as we think about redefining the phone strategy, number one thing, you got to know how you are presented on the device's screen. Number two, do not have a delay. Do not have a delay. I'll give you an example. Imagine somebody, door-to-door sales, right? We talk about, direct mail. Let's go back to the days of door-to-door sales. Imagine somebody's out there selling in your neighborhood, knock on the door, you go answer the door because you kind of want to see what it's about, and they stand there like this hi, and start talking. I'm like, are you okay? You know, what's going on? And I think on the phone, it's the same thing. You've got to shorten that time, if not have no delay whatsoever, right? Be respectful for people's time. Don't put them in there. And as a rep, as an AE, you know, you're going out there and you got a system that's dialing, 10, 15 numbers at one time. How do you orient in terms of when that person does say hello, you've got maybe 15 possibilities, 10 possibilities, 5 possibilities who it could be. That's pretty hard to be lickety split, right? Right there, be good. So I think knowing how you show up on the device, being immediately right there are two critical things that we've got to get right. And I think what's happened is the following. We got greedy. So what happens when you get greedy? Well, one is, for a while there, and it's still a problem to a certain extent, but largely there's been a lot of solutions that have been put in the market to solve for this. But what happened is there were so many calls going out, right? Just millions and billions of phone calls going out. And then guess what? Things started showing up when the calls came in as spam, because the carriers got fed up. The federal government got fed up with all the complaints that they were getting. And they're like, we got to solve this problem. So we're going to start marking calls as spam. And then what happens? No one answers those calls. So when you effectively reduce the cost of doing something to nothing, which, there's a small marginal cost to initiate a phone call. But when you do that, then you get all this flooding in and people got greedy. So sales organizations were like, look, we want to try to get through 20, 30,000 dials today, and we got 10 people doing it. Well, how do you think the carriers are going to like that? How do you think subscribers are going to do that? Particularly when you reward them, when you say hello, and you reward that hello with a 2-second delay. It's just not going to be a good experience. So I think as we talk about kind of redefining the phone, know how you appear, make sure that there's no delay. And then, I think as it gets to the spirit of what we're talking about from a data standpoint, absolutely have pristine data and know it is who you are trying to reach when you're calling them. One of the big things I see here, again, is that, it got really cheap there for a while to go out and buy leads, which just contributed to tons of traffic, irrelevant phone calls that were frustrating for people, and pullback happened, right? And overreaction, overreach happened, where calls were being marked as spam, people were not picking up, hanging up, all that good stuff. And I think we just got too greedy. And I think that, one of the topics we'll talk about here in a moment is that redefining the phone, in my mind, means that you've got to skew towards quality over quantity. Because I think when you do that right, better outcomes happen for your teams and for your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do that on the phone or like any sort of marketing outreach that you're doing, quality over quantity all day. Like VDEX is helping businesses save a lot of money on return on ad spend just by cleaning up their data.
That's right.
This is a good transition to our next topic, don't you think, Adam?
Yep.
Let's do it. So smarter calling, use data to boost connections. Could you kick us off on this one?
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry, the smaller calling. Use data to boost connection. Yeah, 100%. Let's think about it this way. So there's really 3 pillars to your calling strategy you got to get absolutely right. You miss one of them, the rest of them don't matter. These are the 3 pillars, I think. Number one, we kind of talked about it a little bit, is your dialing philosophy, right? You're going to send 10 calls out at a time, hope one gets answered, whatever, right? But you got to have a really good dialer that gives you a pristine connection into the network, right? Get that dialer technology right. Number 2 thing that you need is, let's imagine you got a great connection to the network. We've got to make sure that our people are really well trained. Training is absolutely essential. And I think, Adam, you're a sales leader. I was a sales leader. If you're not spending a proper amount of time training people in terms of how to have really good conversations on the phone, you're setting them up for failure. Because let's be honest, if you're out there calling, this is not the easiest job in the world. Quite frankly, it's really hard. You've got no body language to go off of. You're calling somebody you've never met before with limited bullet points that are out there. It's very difficult. So you got a great dialer and you're trained up. Those are 2 important things. But if you don't have the right data philosophy and you don't have the right data in terms of who it is that you're trying to reach out to that may have some level of intent, some level of interest, or some level of something about them that might be a good connection with what it is that you're trying to sell or book a meeting for or whatever, it's all for naught. conversely, you can have a great data strategy and you can have a great telephone platform, but you get somebody else out there that doesn't know how to do a proper introduction in terms of a call or handle objections, and it's just a miserable experience for everybody. Rep doesn't like it, the party being called hates it. It's just not good. But to come back to data, if you do not have good data defined as high efficacy, it's good right party contact information, some additional attributes that will give you some level of confidence that there is going to be a meaningful reason for that conversation to happen, don't dial. It ruins it for the rest of us. So I think that your data approach has got to be kind of comprised of 2 or 3 key things. One is if you are doing first party data collection, let's say, for example, you're getting it from people filling out lead forms on your website. For heaven's sakes, go out there and validate to the extent that you can that that's really Bob or Diane, that phone number is legitimate and valid, and any other attributes that you're collecting. Go out there and do some level of initial validation. You owe it to your team, right? There's nothing worse than AEs coming in or SDRs coming in, BDRs coming in and say, look, I've just got crap data that I'm working with here. There's no way I can hit my numbers. So do that to validate for your team. The second thing is if you're not doing first party data that's coming through to you, but let's say, for example, you're going out there and you're working with a lead broker or somebody that's providing you a list, test it. Really test it. Make sure that accuracy is one of the hallmarks of their business. Not only it will serve your AEs well, it will serve the people that you're trying to call well, but it will actually keep you in much better graces with the people that are in between you and that phone call getting delivered, right? The carriers and the companies that they work with that try to flag and mark calls as spam and those things. And so from a data standpoint, I think if you're going to distill it down to one thing, it's the following. Have your data strategy be as strong as possible. Do not underinvest in that area, because even if you get everything else right, if you don't have good data that you have high confidence in, everything else falls apart.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
100%. I mean, we talk data all day, so we definitely agree with you there. And, the point that you were making earlier about technology, like you have to have the right technology to hold it all together right now. I mean, that too is crucial, because you'll see a lot of these systems that businesses set up just falling apart because it's like you've got this over here siloed and this over here siloed and things aren't flowing, right? But I don't know. Yeah. Adam, what would you take on all that? How many times have you ever had any awkward wrong number dials?
Oh yeah, I mean, to your point, Chris. I mean, it's the old saying of garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have bad data and you're calling with bad information, you're going to have a bad outcome, right? It's not going to be an effective or efficient use of that person's time. And that's why I keep going back to what we talked about a minute ago with kind of that whole reinvention of how do we use the phone and how do we approach outbound sales in a way that's going to be effective and efficient. I am curious what you're seeing, Chris, on regards to like office or mobile lines. Like I remember 3 or 4 years ago, the main thing that I was hearing from folks was that if you were able to use a tool, and there's many of them out there that will give you decision makers and their phone numbers. If you called the CEO directly on the golf course on his cell phone, he'd pick up, he'd answer, he'd have a conversation. It would kind of cut down that process of kind of multi-threading that relationship and working your way up higher in the organization. Are you seeing that still be effective now, or has that also changed as some of these companies and salespeople that aren't using really good strategy or really good data or aren't super prepared for the call by the time the person actually picks up? Or are you seeing that also kind of change that environment a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think there's a couple of things inside of that. One is there's a big difference in performance between calling a landline or an office line and a mobile number, right? And mobile numbers traditionally are going to have a lower answer rate associated with them because they are, most of the time, they're people's personal devices. Whereas office lines are going to have much higher rate of answer simply because in many cases you're presented with, an answering service up front or a receptionist that's taking that call, or something called an IVR, integrated voice response system, that's like, hey, you've reached ABC company. For this department, press 1, press 2, press 3. So on calling on a more traditional business type line, you generally can get through, but that doesn't mean you're going to get to somebody. Whereas on the mobile phone, if you've got really good data, and you've got a good experience that you're presenting to that individual in terms of how your number or your name is being displayed on the device, the likelihood of them picking up is going to be much higher. And so the example that you get there, like when you're trying to get to the highest decision maker possible in an organization, if you've got really good data and you've got a direct line of sight to how to reach them on that device, and you've took care of all those other things, understanding how your number is going to be presented, you're ready and immediately available as soon as that person picks up, then roll up your sleeves and make that phone call. Big problems happen though if you don't get the data element right. And I want to take just a minute to talk about the problems associated with when you do not have accurate data. So let's imagine for a minute the three of us are people that are entrusted at a wireless carrier with making sure only good phone calls get through to our subscribers. And as part of that role, we look at every single phone call coming in across the network. We're going to start to look for a couple of things in order to be able to see, all right, this phone number I've seen make 20 calls. On the 21st call, what gives me confidence that I should send that call through, one, altogether, or two, that maybe I shouldn't send that call through with a little spam logo or a spam label on top of it? Well, one of the first things that we're going to look at is we're going to look at how many people are actually answering phone calls from that number. So that CEO on the golf course example that you just mentioned, is he answering other calls? And if we see this phone number and he trying to reach that CEO out there, did that phone number get some other calls answered before it maybe made that call to that individual? Because if people are taking those calls, that's a really good signal for the three of us going, okay, I think that number may be actually wanted. Let's let those calls go through. So we're going to look at that. Second thing we're going to look at is when people actually do answer that call, how long are they staying on the phone? So you think about it this way. If we look at 20 phone calls that were placed and all of them average 3 seconds, I would say on that 21st call, we might want to put a spam label on top of it, because there is no evidence to suggest that that call or any call from that phone number is wanted whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And the third thing we might want to look at are people calling that number back. Communication's two ways, right? If we see it over index that it's all going out and nothing coming in, like kind of, they've made 20 calls, but they haven't got any back. And then that call 21 might be a little bit difficult to get through. So what do? You got a sales team, right? You're trying to think about, how do we do our calling strategy? Number one is do everything that you can from a data standpoint and a tech stack standpoint to make sure that you can get the highest answer rate possible. And the way that you do that is going back to what we talked about before, making sure you know how you appear on the device. Number two is that when people actually do pick up and say hello, train our teams so darn well that those calls go longer than 30 to 60 seconds. The shorter those calls are and the more of short calls, it's just telling those carriers all over, I don't know if this thing's wanted. So I think to sum it all up, you can absolutely, if you've got a good data provider that you've vetted, that you feel has the highest accuracy data possible, that really connects that person to that phone number, call all the way to the top. There's a guy I was talking to recently on LinkedIn, great guy. And he was telling a story about how he actually successfully cold called Tim Cook at Apple. Great story. Well, what did he do? He was ready and he was prepared. He had great data. And those calls that he made before he got to Mr. Cook, they lasted a little longer. And so I guess the good news is if you're a BDR or an SDR, you're doing strategic account management exercises like that, you get good data, you're going to have good results as long as you know what's being presented on top of that device and you're giving people a great experience.
Well, and I would imagine that some of that data that you're looking to receive and some of the quality data that you're looking to receive could even be just information and insights from people as you're working your way up the chain, right? So in that example that you gave of somebody that reached out and was able to connect with Tim Cook, that was probably easier because he had a lot more information, a lot more quality information and data at his fingertips and his disposal as a byproduct of those longer, more successful calls that he had made earlier in the process.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think once in a while, you might get lucky enough where if your message is compelling enough, they go actually take it up for you and say, hey, we've been organizationally dealing with this problem. You ought to call this gal back that reached out to me. I think that she's actually got something that could really help us out. I think, and you guys probably see this too in certain areas. I think there was an attitude that developed there for a while with all of these fancy tools that were developed that there's a path to a free lunch here where we don't really have to do the hard work. We're just going to smash a bunch of stuff together, apply some automation and go. But the reality is I don't think it works that way. It doesn't work that way because the system on the other end, whether it be an email inbox, SMS messaging, or phone calls being received or whatever, they're going to filter all that crap out. So you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get through, but when you get through, the results are going to be there for you.
Such a good point. Well, we've got to move on to the third topic. So I'll just pull it right up, which is optimizing call strategies with analytics. So I'm kind of curious, what kind of analytics are you looking at, like connect rates and left messages, or so what are some of those measurements that you're looking at? And then, how are you people optimizing those call strategies?
Yeah, it's a great question. Number one North Star metric, how many calls do we get answered? So that's number one thing that we look at. And if we're not getting a lot of calls answered, that means, there's my thumb right there. If we're not getting a lot of calls answered, that means something upstream prior to the call being placed is off. How we're displaying lead sources, the quality of the phone data that we have, something's off. If you're not getting good answer rates, something's off ahead of the time before you make the call. So I look at answer rates being kind of the great mark of demarcation. If you're getting higher answer rates, then you've done good things leading up to that point. If you're getting lower answer rates, then the things that you've done leading up to it are not working out for you. And you need to triage and identify what that is. It's a data accuracy issue. It's maybe a provider issue in terms of who you're working with that provides your telephony. There's something wrong that's not contributing to a higher answer rate. And when you go downstream from there, after you look at those answer rates, I think that there's some things that you can take into account that help you optimize what you're trying to do on a go-forward basis. One is take a look at the day and time of week that most people are picking up, because patterns start to emerge. Generally speaking, we're in a position where if we're doing outbound efforts, we're going after a concentrated kind of group of people, right? They all look largely alike in terms of their attributes, job titles, positions, areas of responsibility, so on and so forth. And generally speaking, I imagine they probably maintain a lot of the same type of schedules, behaviors, and things like that. And so when you start to look at time of day, day of week, when those calls are performing better, that should inform your strategy, right? You see LinkedIn spattered here and out. I'd call first thing in the morning. Well, good for you. But guess what? If you're trying to reach people who are maybe heavy meeting morning people, and they're going to be better to answer the phone 30 minutes after lunch for the next 2 hours before they go get their kids at school, you're going to have to adjust. And I think the only way that you do that is when you have an honest assessment and look at the data that says, where is the performance the best? And then how do we optimize everything for that? And day and time are important, but you take another cut at it and you look at, all right, our phone calls that we place in the morning, on average, 30 seconds of duration. But late afternoon, we can talk to people for, on average, 4 to 5 minutes. All right, let's take a look at the reasonable slices that we can put against this data, and then go back through and A/B test. I think it's a real error to just assume that the trend is going to hold without testing, because there's other variables and dynamics that put into that. So I think that you got to do a really good job of testing. And I'll make a plug here. I think a lot of this falls not only on the sales leadership, but also just having just kick-ass revenue operations, right? That are looking literally at every way that they can slice and dice and optimize from there. And then going out and conducting a series of tests to make sure that, hey, we think we can optimize to this. We're going to test to it. It's proving itself out. Great. We're going to put more of our efforts in that direction. And honestly, in this day and age, with so many advanced tools and so much data available at our fingertips, there's honestly no excuse for not being more data-driven. The only excuse, I think, for not being more data-driven is maybe when you're just getting started and you don't have enough underneath you to be able to identify or see any type of trends developing.
Well, since you said that, if there's anyone listening who's just getting started, what would be your suggestion for them?
One, probably talk to people like both of you that have a great platform in terms of helping better understand data. Two, and this sounds a little stupid, but for fear of being a dumb sounding person, I'm going to say it anyways. Get to know Excel or Google Sheets or spreadsheets just to become somewhat comfortable in starting, your experience and your interactions with data. I think a lot of times people skew towards the most sophisticated tools that have all of the whiz bang features and functionalities. That's great when you're ready for it. But when you're just starting out in early days, use Excel, use Google Sheets, but make sure that you're tracking things, that you have an initial data structure that's very simple, that you can then learn and iterate and grow upon. I think it's a real mistake to come and put a very exotic solution in at the beginning when skewing towards simple will do, and then build on that as you go forward.
Great point. And, thanks for giving us a plug. And I'll even add on to it, since you said that, a lot of time in B2B, you'll get data and you'll have one phone number for 300 people at one company because, they just have one IP. So that's one cool thing about BDEX is it's consumer data. So you're looking at, that person's phone number because, phone numbers can be tricky.
Very tricky. And then, that's not to mention the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, TCPA,
Right.
TSR. There's so many other rules and regulations that are out there that if you're not careful, you can get yourself into a lot of hot water really fast. And then, I think everyone's favorite is when you get called by an avatar or an AI agent, right? That's trying to come off as an authentic human being, but, really it is, it's a machine. And, states are, getting smart to this. And, one of the things that I think we're going to see here in the next 2 years is that if you're going down this path where you're like, I don't believe in the human anymore, I want to have robots making calls to represent my brand. Those robots are going to have to disclose who they are. And I don't think we will see for quite some time those robots to a level of sophistication that they're going to be able to go out there and even remotely compete with what the best trained salesperson can actually do. In fact, I'm really bullish because there's an authenticity factor when you get a real person on the phone, especially a really good trained person, that I just don't think that the AI is going to be able to compete with. And the fact that, you all probably have seen this as well, right? Like you can actually call as you get a call from one of these AI tools out there that's like, hello, what's your CRM? How are you using your CRM? It's asking you something about CRMs, for example. And you ask it, can you tell me what new features are in the 25 F-150 truck? And it starts to answer, like, come on. But that's what a lot of these things are doing right now. And so, well-trained people, I guess I can't mention that enough, is that when you got people out there, Adam, like you do, you got to spend time training them because the benefits of that are just too significant.
Well, and I think you said it best. There's no substitute for the authenticity of a real relationship. And at the heart of it, that's what drives a lot of sales. And a lot of sales organizations is the relationship side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things like what you guys are all up to that's cool too is that when you do your homework and what may resonate with someone because you've got access to accurate data, that goes a long way. How does it go a long way? Well, if I know, Adam, 5 or 6 things about you that I've been able to pick up because I've got really good augmented, enriched data about an individual, I can guarantee you I'm going to have a competitive advantage in that kind of conversation over maybe somebody that I'm competing with that just knows this is Adam at 555-1212. If I know that this is Adam and I know that this is where he went to school, I know that how long he's been in this certain position, I may have 2 or 3 different things that have been enriched in my data to give me some sort of understanding of what his interests are or what he's maybe recently posted. That puts me in a far better competitive position to have a good conversation with you, a more authentic conversation than somebody that maybe is not going to the extent to try to access those additional sources of information to have a good conversation.
Yeah, it's true. And, there's so much information. We've got, 5,000 segments that it's like literally you can see what TV shows and, people's interests. There's so much out there these days that if you really do your homework, you're right, you can land with a message that resonates. But I thought it was so interesting what you were saying earlier too, that you got to think about your phone number. It's like like with email, we think about spam with email. We don't often think about spam with phone numbers.
Yeah. The spam, in the last part of what you said on the spam phone numbers, could you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
No, I just thought it was interesting, about how we're just talking about the success of phone calls. Well, you're not even going to get the chance to have that message resonate if they don't answer the phone. So what you were saying earlier about the phone number and the delayed time and all of that stuff at the beginning, that is so important so that you can have that highly resonant message get across.
100%. It's those 3 things: how you train your people, access to the best carriers in the country, and good technology to leverage them. If you don't have those 2 things, but you have the best data story or best data philosophy in the world, doesn't matter because you can't get anybody on the phone. So it's a coordinated effort, and it's kind of like a triangle. You take out one angle and the whole thing falls apart. You got to have, I believe, all 3 to be successful.
Yeah. Such a great point. Well, we're getting close to the end of time, so we have to make sure that we ask you, what are some of your favorite tools in your tech stack?
It's funny when we were talking about this a little bit before everyone else joined us. One of the things that you said, and I would be remiss as the CEO of PhoneBurner to not say that. The number 1 favorite thing in my tech stack, I'll let you guess. It's my phone. It's my phone that helps be able to effectively run PhoneBurner. I think everybody can universally say phone is so important, right? From what you do from an email, text, calls, all that good stuff. The phone is probably my absolute favorite thing, and it's relevant because I'm always constantly making sure that we're testing to see how our customers' phone calls appear, and often we use my phone as a guinea pig to see that through. So I'd say phone is number 1. My next 2 answers are probably going to be 2 things that you've never heard before, but for us, for people that are in the world of professionally helping others make phone calls, they're very important. My second favorite technology is the carriers that we use to originate phone calls. And that's a weird one, right? Like, well, a carrier is a carrier is a carrier. Not so fast, right? There is major differences in terms of the carriers that you work with to deliver calls on behalf of your business. And so we work with a group of carriers that are considered, or what's called tier 1, right? They are part of the phone network backbone in the United States. We want to work with the best carriers. And so my favorite technology, second favorite technology is the carriers that we work with. My third favorite technology, and I think it's important, and this is just kind of personal to me, is we work with a variety of different data sources that help us kind of assess the health of phone calls, like how good is the audio? Is there any sort of delay or latency? Are there any packets? An audio stream is a series of packets. Are there any packets being lost? And so I think my third favorite technology is actually a tool that we use that allows us to actually really deeply understand the quality of the phone call from an audio standpoint that we're delivering for our customers. So I'm all about the phone, right? And all those things that I mentioned help make PhoneBurner, our platform, work really well for our users.
That's so cool. I've never heard of a tool that does all of that for phones, but alas, now we know. We've got the PhoneBurner guy here to tell us. So thank you so much for sharing that. And before we wrap up, would you like to tell listeners a little bit about PhoneBurner and how they could reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So PhoneBurner has one critical component to our mission, just one. If you take anything away from it, we want to help people get into meaningful conversations that are important that you have with people that are your prospects or your customers. So our most important metric is live answer rate. We want to have the highest answer rates possible for our customers, because the more conversations that they're having, the better outcomes they're driving for your business. And so if you are in a sales position or even in a service position, or you run teams that do either sales or service, and the phone is a critical component, or you're maybe considering now, because other channels aren't performing as well, maybe looking at the phone as a channel for you to reach out to people, I'd encourage you to look us up at PhoneBurner.com. We are about 70 strong. We're spread out all over the United States. We're a 100% remote company. We've been in business for about 20 years. We're kind, we're direct, and we really care about our customers. And we'd love to understand if maybe we would be somebody that could help you achieve your business outcomes.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Chris. It's been great having you on the show.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you to both of you. It was a great time, great conversation, and look forward to hearing from anybody that needs to have any more information on PhoneBurner. And by the way, you guys got to check out BDEX too. I mean, it's a great service. I think there's a lot of things in there. It'll make Adam very happy if you guys go and take a look at the website and maybe fill out that lead form.
That's true. And I'd love to speak to you on the phone about it.
That's right.
Yeah,
sounds good.
I think that was the excited Adam face. So yeah, we're going to wrap up too by giving you more of a BDEX plug. And since we have Adam here, I always like bug Adam, because you know what, he says it better than most. So, you know, I want to invite audience members to get powered by BDEX. So I'm going to put up a QR code, and really this QR code is just going to take you to bdex.com. And when you get there, you'll see a button that says talk to an expert, and then they're going to talk to Adam. And so Adam and his team. So Adam, when they get to the talk to an expert button and they come in and they talk to your team, tell them, like, what would they expect?
Yeah. Excellent, Jesse. Thanks for that. Yeah, we at BDEX, we are focused on a couple of key things, primarily helping you to understand who your customer is, understand them better, and reach more people like your top prospects or your top customers. And so we've built one of the best identity graphs to help do that on the consumer level here in the US. We are using and have built some really powerful AI-powered machine learning tools to help really with the analysis of that audience and the expansion of that audience as well. So we've got some really cool things that we're doing. Would love to talk to you a little bit more about them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Adam. And thanks again, Chris, for joining us. This was a really great episode. I'm going to go ahead and close this out with our outro video. Until next week. See you later, everyone. Oh, I think we're getting your dog there right before we say goodbye. So we'll say goodbye to your dog too.
Yeah, poor guy's got the cone of shame right now. So he's not loving life right now.
Well, I'm glad he made an appearance. We'll see you guys next week.